I think, right? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. Convene the meeting at 4:01 p.m. on November 4th, 2021. This meeting is being recorded, video recorded especially. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Thank you, Dawn. Okay, let's do the roll. If you are here, say here. Mayor.
Here.
Butch.
Here.
Chief.
Yes, here.
David Muscaritalo.
Here.
Carol Collins. Amy McMahon.
Here.
Steve Drakulich.
Here.
Jen Stromsten.
Here.
Liz Gilman. Jean Wall.
Here.
David Singer. George Vandelinder. Marlo.
Here.
Fernando.
Here.
Robert Hay is not here, I don't believe. Eric Turog is not here. Usually they don't show up. Laura. Not yet, or not intending. Ed Jarvis. I know you're here. Greg Diefendorf. I think I see Greg.
Is here.
Thank you. Peter McIver.
Present.
Neil Joyce.
Here.
Dennis Ross.
Here.
Katrina.
Here.
Adam.
Here.
Roger. Okay, we have a quorum and we can begin. I don't believe there are any minutes yet, and that's not to say that there should or shouldn't be, but we had a short week and I'm sure people are very busy. So the next meeting we'll get to the minutes. All right, so let's get.
I promise both meetings.
What's that?
Next meeting, I promise both
Okay,
meetings.
thank you. All right, we're just gonna jump into it. I think I'm looking for a robust meeting, a robust conversation about the plans that were presented last meeting by Dennis, Katrina, and Adam. And while I'll be happy to facilitate the discussion, I would really like the leadership of this discussion to be along with well, the following people: Butch, Dennis, Neil, and Steve, to kind of lead the discussion, and the mayor, of course. And when others want to chime in, let me know, and I'll let you participate. So who wants to begin? I think we really have to get to a place of having a design or having a idea of what the design will be, so that by the end of the month, we're going to have something that's real, so we can begin to think about a real design and going out to bid. So who wants to begin? How about I'll start with Neil. Or Butch, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Finally, we've reached the point where we're actually doing what we were put together to do, and that's build a new fire station. And last week's meeting, I think, was just, the first run through after the sale of the property and starting to kick off the full committee to look at design. Now, I've been working with Chico Ross since maybe 2011. We've gone through full evaluations of all the departments, public safety departments in Greenfield with Pacheco Ross. They identified all the spaces in all the departments. They understand all the equipment we have. They understand how we use our equipment, how we service our community. And Dennis and company has probably reviewed some 20, maybe more properties and layouts and some basic designs, along with Decon architects out of Hartford, Connecticut. And so the work on the layout of the bays and the living quarters and the offices has been gone through many times. And so it may look like to the committee that Pacheco Ross and a couple of other folks threw this together in a month or a month and a half, but actually they have a real long history with Greenfield. Probably know more about Greenfield than some of us that lived here all of our lives. So that piece was real easy for them to be able to assemble with some tweaking with the chief and others over the last month or so. And the lot layout and our budget also has created a situation for them to be able to train themselves somewhat maybe in the design, in the layout of the design. But the design of the building and the streetscape, I think that's where the committee can really weigh in, and the committee can work with the architect and kind of bring about maybe some varieties and approaches to the streetscape. I know in the last meeting, there were a lot of voices about, signage and other pieces on the street. And in that light, I asked the architect to put together 3 additional presentations of streetscape for us. And I know that it's only been a very short time, and they probably haven't had a chance to fill that. But I think if we're presented with 3 or 4 variations, the outgrowth of that can be that we can come together as a group and focus on what the street will look like. I know in 2012, when they did their work, they came up with 24,184 square feet for the fire department. Now, we've reviewed that numerous times with the former fire chief and the current fire chief, and we've reduced that square footage down through what the former mayor wanted to see, and a reduction in cost, plus some efficiencies in the industry that have created some reduction in space. And I think now we're somewhere between 19 and 20,000 square feet for a building, which is probably what we can afford. So with that, I'd sort of like maybe Dennis or Katrina to, and maybe Neil to weigh in on how we might proceed forward and actually being involved as a committee to look at various designs and put some center on where we want to go. I know there's been some articles in the paper. I've received some calls and emails. I've got some Facebook posts that have come back, and I know people are not necessarily happy with what they saw initially, but we're just beginning the process. When they did the new courthouse in town, they presented a very modernistic view, and there was a large outcry, and that was discarded. But we're just beginning, and I think people should just take a step back and realize we're just starting the process. I know we're on a timeline. I know we have to move quickly. We have to give the designers go ahead as soon as we can so that we don't hurt ourselves on the other end. So with that, whichever one of you wants to jump in and maybe Dennis, and give us a little, or Katrina, and give us a little update on how we're doing with some variations of design.
Sure, this is Dennis. Let's get right back down to the very beginning of things. And we heard you loud and clear that, even as a committee, you weren't real thrilled with the streetscape and the presentation to Main Street. So from a plan point of view, and only a plan point of view, we took a look at that. We heard you loud and clear, and we'll show that in a few minutes. We have changed that orientation in terms of the plan, right, to give more of a presentation to Main Street. What we did do was we went through very quickly on our own what we consider to be probably 5 or 6 possibilities. And again, most of those concentrating really on that streetscape, all right? We're not going to show those to you. And the reason we're not going to show those to you is because we truly feel that we don't have adequate committee and city representation. And whatever it is we show you, somebody will like it, somebody won't like it. But the bottom line is, we need, I think, to hear all the voices on the committee and then weigh that and see if any of the 6 that we did this morning even approach what you as the people in Greenfield really want and need. We've heard a lot of things from a lot of folks. And, as the chief says, it's a modern fire service that wants a modern building. I have to remind you again, we are the tool to get you there. It's your building, it's your community. And Kate had a great idea of not presenting and just sending you off on a wild goose chase in many directions. So let's hear from you. And once we hear from you folks, then we can take that, what we hear and start coalescing it into a real design that suits both the committee and your city. So that's my spiel, and I'm sticking with it.
I think Steve had his hand up. You're muted, Steve.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I know that the main focus is really Main Street and the look is, but I do have, we didn't really get a chance to talk much about the plan last time, since it was the first time we saw it was when it was presented. And even today, we just finally got plans to look at. I do have some questions about the plan, but not related to any of the function of the fire station, but related to the function of the public. And I'm sure that these are questions that can be just answered, and I'm putting them as a question. So my question number 1 is, all the parking that is facing the bunks, the sleeping quarters, is that parking for firemen? Or is that parking for the public?
Both.
Both, okay, so
Both.
so
Yep.
we are expecting the public is going to be coming into this building, right?
To some
And-
extent, absolutely. And I
Well,
think we can
that's
talk to the chief about how that works. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
There will
so
be portions
my
of-
question is that and these are just questions. The training rooms, are those public access rooms? Or is the town going to be sharing in that use? Just asking the question.
Again, we assume so. I think the chief holds various internal trainings and also trainings that have other departments in it. And
Right.
at some time, as the mayor said, if they need an EOC, certainly you're going to get other town departments and people in there. So
Yeah,
yes, Steve,
which
absolutely.
makes total sense, and it's arranged so it's within the public zone essentially, so that those are, with
Correct. That's
that
correct.
nobody goes through the fire station to get to those rooms. So, I think it's a little odd that there is nobody meeting you at the door, and maybe that's by choice. I don't know if the front doors are secured. You don't really find a person until you wander all the way back in to the administration area. Are the front doors locked so that they have to be let in?
I would ask the chief to answer that. We did talk
Yeah.
about this at a previous meeting.
Yeah.
Right. We can make that whatever he wants, you want, or the city wants.
Yeah, so there's two parts to that question. The first one is ideally you'd like to go in and you'd be greeted at a desk,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
The site layout that we have, we had to weigh that out with the access and the operation of the fire department. And so what I mean by that is if you look at the dorm layout that was presented last week, it actually was flipped and the dorms were on the other side. The problem with the dorms on the other side is that it created a longer path to get to the apparatus. So we need to weigh out what's the more important part of the design. In my opinion, the operations is number 1. So the idea with the layout that was presented here was it would be pretty much like we had it at the old building. You rang the doorbell, you came in the vestibule, you rang the doorbell, somebody came out and greeted you and then escorted you where you needed to go. I see no difference in that, where, yes, it may be a little inconvenient for the administrative assistant or somebody in the day office space to come out and greet somebody. But what we get operational supersedes that, in my opinion.
Okay, so the door will be locked. So the door, in theory, the door will be locked. You have to ring the bell and somebody's gonna come to, I mean, what is the public interface going to be? Who is gonna be coming to the fire station? I'm just curious.
So,
I mean, I remember coming to get my, fire alarm inspection. Does that still happen here if you're a landlord and you need to get, sign up a fireman to come do the inspection? Is this where you come?
Chief, we lost you.
You're still on, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you,
Okay.
Steve. It's the
So
chief.
if I was, the only time I think I've ever been there as a citizen is to do a fire alarm permit for a duplex to sign up an inspection. Does that happen here so the public would come for that purpose?
Sorry, we're just trying to figure out if it's if it's a computer on my end. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me first start off by saying the idea is that you're not going to push the button from the outside the fire station. You would walk
Yeah.
into the vestibule and you would push a button and somebody would come out to greet you. Okay, so it's not that you're standing outside. As far as public access, yes, the public access that we typically see are folks that want to speak to the fire chief, and folks that need to pull permits or do investigations of past underground tanks. But most of, probably 95% of the public access that comes to the firehouse needs to see somebody within the administrative wing. Okay, did I answer the question?
Yes, yes. I guess I still just, it's fine. And I realize there's not going to be a great deal of public access to you. I just think it's a little odd that there's that the front door is sort of with your antique vehicles are all sort of kind of unsecured in the lobby. And
They wouldn't be, Steve. You wouldn't have access to get into the museum part. The vestibule would be a small space.
okay,
that you
so
would enter in.
vestibule, so you can get into the vestibule and that inner door is going to be the door that'll be locked that you'll have to.
Correct.
All right.
Which is not that uncommon in fire stations.
Okay.
Larger departments, larger cities at their main headquarters, you might see somebody sitting at the front desk, when you first get in there. In a lot of departments I've been in, you actually get escorted to the administrative wing, but it's all segregated for the public. And so there's no public that goes through the working part of the fire station. There's no access to go into their living space. There's no access to go unless they're escorted by a firefighter.
Okay. All right. So that's fine. I'm satisfied. I think it's still a little clumsy, that.
Well, that may show up differently in designs they present us going forward too as well. Is there anybody else that wants to weigh in on where we're at, where we're going, what we're doing?
So could I mention one more thing? So the previous firehouse that we were at, the way that the public interacted with the department was they rang a bell, somebody came to the door outside, and then was escorted to either the fire prevention office or the chief's office, which was a whole separate section in the fire department. So it's kind of the same as what we've always had, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Actually, it'll be better because you'll actually come inside. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you, Butch. I'd just like to start by saying I totally agree on the flow, Bob, of the fire station. I believe it's conducive to a very easy flow for the firefighters, and being one for a while, I know sometimes it was convoluted coming from the top stairs down the stairs, round corners. I think this is good. And as far as the public access, I think people need to remind themselves of the world that we live in nowadays, of just walking into a public building and wandering around until you get to where you want to be. It's no longer safe for the firefighters or other people. Those days are gone. So we kind of have to remind ourselves about that. The one thing that I stand behind the plan and the flow. I think you guys have done a great job. You nailed it right on the head. I think it's great. I'm glad to hear that Patrico and Ross, that you are going to come back with some different landscape and maybe a few different designs for the front. Because I will say that I didn't get a chance. I thought that I have to explain the last meeting. I thought when we were talking about dates, the meeting was over with, and I kind of signed off prematurely. So, but I think the roof line and the front of the building kind of smacks people in the face. I've got numerous phone calls and comments from people that just don't like the design of the front. I get the constraints. I see bills. I see invoices every day on a construction site, so I know the cost of construction. And sometimes they will knock you over when the truck driver gives them to you. So I understand the constraints that we're in, but I think we need to soften up the front and make it feel a little bit more like traditional greenfield. That's what I'm hearing from the taxpayers that flipped the $16 million bill. Those are the people that we have to keep happy. It's their money. As with if they were looking for a house, they wouldn't buy a house that they didn't like. So they are investing in the fire department, and I believe that those are the people that we need to satisfy. I've heard everything from, it looks like the package store across the street. I get the mayor to laugh on that one. and you know, and I kind of play the middle ground as a city councilor to people. I try to smooth people over and say, listen, we have some constraints, and part of it is the budget. I used to have an old saying when I was in the fire department as a deputy chief, and we were told that we couldn't do something, and we'd have to explain it to people on the floor. And I just, we have to plow with the mule that we have. So we're dealt our cards. We have a budget. I'd love to add $6 million more to it and make a Taj Mahal, but we know that isn't going to happen. So I think my suggestion to the designers is that we need to soften up the front a little bit, maybe make it look a little bit more New Englandish, if that's even a word. And I agree with the glass in the front. On the bays, I believe in the natural light. Natural light is a great thing to harness and to use to your advantage. So that's basically about what I'm hearing. So I think my advice would be to soften up the front, to make it look a little bit more aesthetic to the older downtown of Greenfield. And I think that would make our taxpayers ecstatic and cut down on the emails and phone calls that I get. Not that I don't like hearing from them, but sometimes I don't like what I'm hearing. So I think that's my advice to the design team. And I hope to see something in the future that's toned down a little bit and maybe fits in a little bit. That's what I have to say so far. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Very good input. Thanks.
Anyone else have anything? Yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
I think I just heard Ed Jarvis speaking as a city councilor saying he had another $6 million in his back pocket. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
I've already updated the budget, Mayor.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Glad to hear it.
Um,
So I too have heard and seen many of the comments, and I don't necessarily disagree with them. I also don't have a huge problem with the current design, because I know it facilitates what the fire department needs. And I certainly have no problem with the interior layout. So to the extent that we can make some changes, or at least see what the other options might be, as long as they still continue to facilitate the interior layout, then I think it's worth doing. One of the things that seems to keep coming up, an idea, even though we have many, and I don't think people think of it, but first of all, I'm now look at downtown Greenfield from the second floor a lot. But we have a fair amount of flat roof buildings in this city, believe it or not, in downtown. They look flat from the street level, let me put it that way. So to that end, that's not an unusual look that we're seeing on this design. What I think might help, if it's feasible and can be worked in, feasible from a space standpoint, and bringing in as much light as possible. What I would say might help is that one singular area there in the front with the ski jump roof. Is there a way to design that it is more of a peaked roof that isn't terribly costly? Or a what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I used to know it better, my architectural terms better. You know, a quad, can it be more like perhaps even a tower or something with a peaked roof? Same concept, glass windows on the ground level to a certain extent, some glass upstairs, up in the upper area, but just fix that one section in conjunction and along with whatever else is there. That's just one of my thoughts. That seems to me to be the main problem visually for people that might help.
Hey, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of kind of saying what I said last week, I'm going to kind of rehash a little bit of that. But I do want to say I've heard a lot of positive things about this, and I think I just want to put that out there. And I felt bad at the start of this podcast, of this meeting, that, you know, it felt like our consultants and our contractors, our designers are sort of on the defensive. And I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry for the tone in which this community communicates with one another. So I think this is great. I think you've really heard the people who matter most, who have to actually work within this and perform essential duties from this. So thank you. And this reflects a tremendous amount of thought. So from there, I just want to say, I think in the shed roofs and a lot of it, you know, what it reminds me in a way of is those houses we have around here where there's like the original farmhouse and then there's like the add-on thing. There's words for this, but like, and then there's the other add-on thing and then it ends up attached to a barn, then another barn. And it has that kind of feeling of like the Northfield house that goes on forever. So I think that's great. I do think the front is unceremonious. I don't have a lot of feelings about the design. I can go either way because our town is all over the place. So I think whatever people are saying is great. I do want to say for me, it's the suburban aesthetic of it that bothers me. And what I mean by that is it's actually oriented to the parking, which is just not right for a town. And so, and it needs to have like a face. What it reminds me of right now is a little bit, you know, those like developments they have out in Vegas where there's like the garage doors are forward and there's like no feeling of there being a front of the house. So I think in that way, regardless of whether it's like 1920s-y, like our current firehouse, or, you know, 1840s-y, it has to have a face to the street that makes sense to people, you know, that they can kind of read as like an entrance. When you get to the inside, I do want to be a little bit picky. I think the vestibule is insufficient. I have navigated this town with a 7-year-old, a toddler in a stroller, and my mother-in-law in a rolling wheelchair. We couldn't get inside of that vestibule and wait for someone to answer us. So I think we have to sort of conceive of an area where the doors and the things and the tolerances are a little bit, I respect the need for security, But maybe the museum and the vestibule need to all be one thing. It just needs to be a space where people can be welcomed in and wait for whatever appropriate services they're trying to get to. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, David.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I appreciate what everybody has said, and I think I'm more along the lines of what Jen just said in terms of the face of the fire station needs some work, and in my mind there are some traditions to these structures, and I'd like to see them be incorporated in a creative way, and that's really what you do as architects, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to do it that way, so that I get a feeling when I look at the front of the building that makes me think I'm in Greenfield. And so that's all I have to say about it. But I think that's the area of most concern. The rest of it, I think, is fine. And this is where we have to have the meatier discussion and get to a decision. Thanks.
Anyone else? Chief?
I think
Chief, did you have your hand up? Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
And a little bit now.
Garbled.
Speak up.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, so a little bit of computer problem here. So I have a question for the architects, but before I have a question, I just want to make a comment that typically in New England, you'll see a firehouse that has an apron and then the bays discharge right onto the main thoroughway. This site does not permit that. And I'm glad it doesn't permit that because the driveway that goes up, that we come out and go down gives us enough space so we can drill, we can do our checks, we have space on the driveway for things that we do operationally. So, so I just think that needs to be in context. But even without that, the site's not big enough long ways. If Dennis can correct me if I'm wrong, is not big enough the long way to house the apparatus discharging right on the main street. So, so my follow-up is I have a question, and this is a question that I've received often, is about glass, and whether or not glass is A, secured, whether or not glass is B, energy efficient, and what glass does for a front of the building. I know it seems silly, but I've gotten a lot of questions about glass one way or another.
Okay, as our resident lead AP, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, Kate, you are certainly equipped to handle this, so I'm going to throw the ball in your court.
You mooted, Kate.
Thank you. So speaking to the question that the chief has heard about security and energy efficiency, there are plenty of glazing options, but what we typically design in a station like this is a low insulated glass. It's created of multiple panes, sometimes with argon gas in between the panes, fully sealed. And this provides a great amount of insulating value at the window, and also prevents degradation of materials on the inside. For example, when we use it even at the bays, it prevents things from fading, and we know that UV effects on the PPE and equipment is a concern for the firefighters. But this is all around the building. The concept of glazing as insecure. We have tempered glass at all doorways and windows that are close to the ground. Anything that someone could bump into, we would have tempered glass. So there's the safety is provided there, but also the configuration of the way the windows are, that you have certain numbers of panes. I know, for example, at my house, I've got windows with small panes in them. Nobody wants to break through that. There's just too much in the way. So there's a lot in the design and the material that can provide security and energy efficiency all around the building. Does that answer your question, Chief?
But a couple of the questions,
Move over to the mic closer.
goodness. Is this better?
Yes.
I guess I got to talk really close to the computer. So I guess it did answer the question, but a couple, just a follow up with that is that if we were to make changes, say to the Main Street side, which included more glass or took away glass, if say they were all glass on the front of the building, what's the safety in regards to somebody trying to smash the window? Or trying to damage the glass structure in the front of the building.
Okay, well, first I'll say I don't think anyone was looking for ballistic protection in this area. So certainly, if there was a desire, that's ballistic protection is more expensive, certainly. But the glazing, again, that gets put into windows like this is relative to the size. If someone is hell bent on getting into such a space, they're going to find a way of crashing through the glass. Nothing's going to stop that short of ballistic prevention, like I was talking about. But the configuration of the window panes, if you have a lot of skinny windows, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and we showed horizontal there, what are they going to get out of this space? They're not going to be able to drive one of the antiques out. They're not going to be able to pull the parts out. I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding the question as well. What do you think somebody would get out of doing such a thing?
Terrorism.
Great question. I don't know. It was just posed to me, so I posed it as it was posed to me. So thank you.
Chief, in the past.
The other thing I'd bring up, Chief, just and to everybody is, in the front, we're trying to be very careful how we use the glass in the training room because it is a training room and it's got multi-purpose, could be an EOC. Light is a beautiful thing, but I don't want to flood it with light where you can't use it for its intended purpose. So we're just trying to be careful. We're going to listen to everything you say, and take that in and try to put something out there on the other end that solves the operational problem, but gives you the streetscape and the feeling you're looking for.
I have a question on glass. If somebody were to, smash some of the glass 5 years down the road, is replacement easily, depending on what you use?
Yes.
Or do you provide, the city with some extra panels in case we have an issue? How do you approach that?
It certainly that can be asked for in the specifications, Butch. Sometimes we ask for on certain materials like floor tile, paints and so forth, a certain percentage of what's in the contract as an extra so that there's a attic stock, if you will. But for glazing, that is something that is generally fairly easy to replace as long as it's not like a specific tint. For example, if you tinted everything green or gray or blue, the chances for it to be made exactly the same way 5 years down the road may not be as high. But if you have something that's just clear float glass, that's very easy to reproduce and replace. And the way that the glazing system is put together allows for replacement.
Thank you. Any other questions on, yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, just real quick. I just wanted to say to Dennis that what I've heard is that the training room side of the building, people didn't have a problem with not having a lot of glass there. Matter of fact, the comments I heard was, don't add glass over there. Less glass is better. The only thing I heard was the big number on the front, and everybody knows about that. So we won't even discuss that. But yes, less glass was what I was hearing. They weren't saying add more glass. So
Okay.
If that helps.
And the 39 is long gone.
I assume so.
Fernando, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question. pretty sure Pete or the chief probably already thought about this, but I was just wondering where the communications tower was gonna go. It's a pretty tight footprint.
Communications tower,
Yeah.
in the design,
Yeah,
Dennis or
Yeah,
Katrina?
Yeah.
It
It-
depends on what equipment they are using, and Chief, can you comment on the radio antennae?
Yeah, so right now it's in dispute whether or not we need a radio tower. The way that our radio system works, we will definitely need to put some type of antenna above the roof line. However, the site that we've chosen is direct line of sight with the main tower that our communication system's already on. So, I don't know if there's going to be need for a traditional, 8,500-foot tower per se, due to the way that the radio system is comprised within the community.
And I will just add to help clarify that there are options on the building in multiple places to have an antenna mount, a rig, a little, not huge, but there are a number of high places, for example, along the mezzanine pop-up where the roofs are doing this, where we can certainly incorporate that and it would look consistent with the appearance of the building, so it wouldn't be a detraction.
So Fernando, were you thinking about a standalone tower,
Yeah, I was
on the
just-
ground? Yeah,
I was
Yeah,
just
those
thinking
I think
what we
are-
have now, and that's 3 feet of cement that you need to attach it to into large footprint. So I was just thinking about that. So
right. David?
Just a couple comments and a question. The comment is I don't on the existing design, I don't think there's a need for two signs like it shows. There's a sign facing Main Street, and there's a sign the tilted sign, which looks kind of awkward and funny. So I think one sign announcing the fire station is plenty. And I was almost thinking, how do I explain it? Where the corners come together, where the two sign corners come together. I don't know if there's a way to make that like flat so that it's not so sharp as a corner, and the sign's not really facing straight onto Main Street, but it's kind of coming out like at that. I don't know what that angle would be. I don't know if Dennis or anybody can understand what I'm saying, but instead of a sharp corner, it's flat it comes instead of sharp, it comes flat, and then the sign is kind of not facing right straight on Main Street, but it's projecting out towards, up towards Main Street. Might look nice, but my point is I just don't think we need two signs announcing the fire station. I think one sign would be sufficient and look nice. Maybe like a 45-degree wall instead of a sharp wall is what I'm trying to say.
Understood.
Yep.
We understand it.
And I guess my question is was the front with all the glass, it looks like it was designed to let light in, but also so folks could see some of the museum items from outside. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that was the intent.
Okay, so maybe the wall that's like coming off of where the firemen are staying. I mean, maybe that could be less glass and like more brick, which matches where the training area is, and it's just that little front side that folks can look into. I don't know, but that's maybe that cuts down on the glass, and it provides a little bit more New Englandly look on the front, and then maybe squaring off the roof instead of that slope. But I think it all depends on how you want the sign orientated. But those are my questions and comments.
Anyone else? Anything to say on the, yes, Mayor?
I'll let Jean go. She hasn't spoken, and then I can follow her.
Oh, go ahead, Jane.
Thank you. My concern is for the sleeping area, that having cars come and go might disturb the sleep of the firemen because they could sleep in the day and at night. Have you figured out what to do about that?
Yes, Jean, if I may answer, it's twofold. Well, actually, perhaps even threefold. Certainly, in the evening, someone comes in with their headlights on, that's very bright. So with the windows particularly, Not only are they insulated, so that helps with the sound attenuation between the parking lot and that area, but blackout shades that would be provided on the inside to help block all of the light. That is something so that they're completely black inside. Even if it were a bright sunny day, they would not be getting any daylight, so they're not going to get any headlight intrusion there. The third thing that could be done is if we absolutely needed to would be some kind of screening, and maybe it's the small planted area between the sidewalk and that side of the building could have some shrubs or some landscaping.
One other thing, Gene, just the nature of the construction of the wall itself, because of the nature of the materials and the insulation, I won't say it's soundproof, but it is certainly very sound deadening. So, you know, again, along with the windows and the roof, same kind of thing, you're getting a lot of sound deadening. And then as Kate mentioned about the light.
So as a follow-up, I just want to make sure that there will be, the blackout shades will be provided and they won't go to Walmart and get curtains that look ugly from the outside. That was my part of my concern too, is that it will all architecturally look pretty from the outside.
Yes,
Thank you.
we want it to look pretty too.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor.
I was just gonna say, I frankly think you've got the training area exactly right. I spent the better part of my adult life as an adult trainer in many situations, in many training rooms across the world. So those training rooms that have no light get really, I don't know how long your training courses are, maybe it doesn't matter, but if you have a couple of day-long trainings and you don't have any light coming in from the outside, it can get a little hard on your eyes and your psyche and your ability to concentrate. So I think you've got it just right. You mentioned last meeting that you purposely made the walls there because you do need to use them for whiteboards and video screens and so forth, and that your glass is at the upper level. So I think, frankly, I would say it's exactly what it ought to be. You know, do you take off the bottom row of the glass so that there's maybe only 2 rows? That's the design issue that you could address in one way or the other if you're going to redo the front a little bit. So I like the mixture of daylight and you know, room light.
Okay.
Let's just another comment on the training room. Just want to point out to the committee that that is the northern exposure of the building. So you are not going to get direct sunlight into that space. If you do, then we have much bigger problems because the earth has shifted on its axis. And we could be looking at the end of time. So I think it is a great space. It is very unlikely to get natural or direct sunlight. It will be indirect. It will be a soft glow as opposed to a very, very bright beam. So just something else to keep in mind.
Okay, Chief. Oh, sorry.
I do want to mention, so I wasn't advocating for more glass, less glass, or whatever. I was just throwing out the glass conversation. I will follow up with what the mayor say, specifically about the training room. The less glass wall space we have at the working level, the better. Because especially with it being an EOC, we need every inch of floor space for status boards and things like that. So a lot of glass shouldn't even be an option when in the training room and the /EOC. Up above is fine, but the more wall space we can get that's usable wall space, the better off we are with that space. Thank you. Oh, and the firefighters had a couple comments. Is it okay for them to speak now?
Sure, go ahead.
So we had some concerns raised by
members of the floor, the line firefighters, or some other ideas. We were wondering if we could add another drive-through bay on the backside, either behind where the engines park on the far southern end, perhaps or moving the generator on the other side to that side, so you could have another bay door where the trailers would back in, to make backing the trailers in easier. There's also a question of the lockers in the hallway, if there was a way to move the lockers from the dorms out there. Going down the road, Decon Showers. So when we come back from a fire, we like to shower in the decon area instead of walking through the kitchen and showering where the 3 showers are there. So you're covered in soot and smoke. You got one decon shower, you got 6, 8 people that need to shower, sharing one shower. Or are we just going to walk through the kitchen covered in soot and sweat to the shower area in the clean hallway? It was brought up. There might be a good solution. I don't know. So if there's only one shower, we're not going to have, in the future, we might have different genders working here. There's no gender separation in that area. And there was a question of, for the future, is there a way to add another dorm down the road, 30, 20, 30, maybe next year when we have staffing that would permit having a staffing of 11 people. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? In our tours with the previous chief and the current chief and others of a lot of public safety facilities and a lot of firehouses, we got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one of the good things that we saw was in Medfield, and that was a Dor Whittier design who did our high school. They built a beautiful public safety facility. And one thing they did, if you go into any police station, fire station, or ambulance station, they always have a male and a female locker room and a male and a female set of showers. In Medfield, what they did is they had one locker room for male and female and a series on the police side, because we're more police than fire. They did the same thing on the fire side. They had a series of 4 large rooms that were showers and changing rooms and dressing rooms. And they were lockable. When you went in there, you locked the door and it was your own private space. And they reduced a whole series of lockers and a whole series of changing and bathing rooms, which saved the project a lot of money in plumbing and other things, but also allotted more space for other things within the facility by reducing it down to that. So I don't know if that's something you've taken into consideration with this design or not, but just throwing it out there as something we've seen it's worked really well somewhere else.
Right, and Butch, I'll just mention that we've used that solution as well in at least one of our fire station designs, so we're familiar with how that works and appreciate hearing the concern.
Thanks. Anyone else? Seeing nobody. Okay, moving forward, sort of dovetailing this into the agenda, sort of the planning updates. You're going to present us with some designs. When do you think you could do that? Should we adjust our meeting schedule to accommodate you folks to present that?
When's our next meeting, Butch?
Well,
I think it's the
Scheduled for Monday, I believe.
Monday, right?
The 8th.
The 8th. Does that give you enough time, or do you want us to adjust that?
we scheduled several, so.
Yeah, we're flexible, so.
That's a lot of stuff, to look at the front, the showers, I love Ed's term New Englandy. I think that is a word, Ed. Yeah, if we have a little bit more time so we can at least, say yes, no, or maybe on a lot of these issues. When after the 8th was the next possibility?
I believe it was the 15th.
The 15th, yeah.
I'd be good with that. Kate, can we, that we could definitely manage.
That we can definitely manage. I do want to bring up something that Dennis mentioned early on, that we had heard concerns about the floor plan at the vestibule, and I don't know if Dennis I think it's a good time to share what we did do with the floor plan. So irrespective of the exterior look discussion, we did look at that, and this may help in the way that the new design of the front or options at the front could be.
Blow that up, Adam.
Yeah, if you could zoom in on there. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So, and in hearing some of the concerns about vestibule, we may do a little more adjustment on that so that the vestibule is larger. But also so that the museum area is protected and is secure, whether it's secure from the vestibule, as well. I think it should be, per the concerns that I've heard here, as well as just logical planning. We think we can accommodate that with this layout. So we reoriented the entrance so it is directly onto Main Street, onto the sidewalk. I think this will help address a lot of the concerns about having a face and a presentation. You know, we don't know the materials and the glazing yet, but having the main door there, I think helps us a lot to address those concerns. So what you see is coming in the vestibule, the museum area off to the east. And I've shown a ramp here. We know that there is height difference across the site. And if we have a short piece of ramp here, this may help reduce the cost of cut and fill further down the hill. So I'm just putting it in there as a design option at this point, and I really need to work with our civil engineers to make sure that that is viable and makes the most sense for everyone. So that's just a small plan item. I would like to hear, as I know this is a new part of the front of the building, but as you're looking at it, we would appreciate any kind of reaction you have at this point, because it will affect what we pursue in terms of the design option looks, appearances for the front there.
Okay. Go ahead, Chief. If you can reduce the design so I can see the people that want to ask a question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a question. First of all, I like the old layout where it discharges to the parking lot. It is less travel for handicap handicap accessibility is a lot less. You don't have to get out on the main street and go across the sidewalk and then down a little ramp to, I think it was a lot tighter. And so personally, I like the ability of the front entrance coming in off the driveway. I understand that the aesthetics looked a little different on Main Street. My personal opinion is I liked where the entrance was originally. So just my 2 thoughts. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
What, anyone else have a comment on that? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I like Plan 2. I mean, I think that does address the issue of having the fire station face the street. There, you could make more of a plaza out in front of it so that you reduce, a distance to the, from the entrance to the handicap spaces. You can move handicap spaces as just painted lines on pavement. But I think that makes a lot more sense. I think that would be something the town would be look at as in a more positive way.
Kind of agree with Steve, and I think, is it possible to put a couple of handicap parking spaces in the front there to accommodate the front entrance?
The accessible spaces that were shown in the plan previously are as close to that front entry as possible.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay.
I have seen a couple of fire stations where the memorial area was definitely on a plaza. I see what you're doing there. And that's a good thing. So Steve's idea of a plaza there. I don't know if that's what you intended to be there, so pavers or whatever, or if it's intended to be grass, but that might assist the people in the handicap spaces and give them a pathway, which is what I think Steve was suggesting. And that way they're not having to park on Main Street and maneuver in the way that the chief was talking about. So, or the memorial area could be moved to the other side there.
David, did you have a question?
You know, just the comments. I think I totally can see where the chief is coming from, but I think that the fire station is just more inviting with the entrance facing the main street. And I guess, you know, I don't know if this is a question for the town, but there's public parking in front of the fire station on Main Street. So maybe a couple of those spaces or one of those spaces could be a handicap space too, or two of them in that area for the public to park, you know, the public parking on Main Street might help out too. But I think that where the handicap spots are now, I think they can be accommodations, but it just looks more inviting with the front entry facing the town in the Main Street.
I'll just offer, I think putting a designated handicap parking space within the right of way of a main road is probably not the best idea.
Well, there's spaces on Main Street and handicapped folks park on them now downtown. I mean, there's hundreds of spaces, so it's just an
But
option.
if they were, Dave, if they were to park in the direction of the flow of traffic, they'll be getting out of the driver's side into traffic. I just think that's not a good solution, but.
You know, it's just a suggestion, that's all.
Yep.
We don't have to do it. I'm just saying this. I think there's some good options for handicap parking, and my point was it's just more inviting with the entry looking at the main street. That's all.
I don't think the distance would be any different.
Right.
I don't think the distance would be any different between.
I just want to keep reminding you folks that there are people who don't arrive by car. So this is an important conversation to have, but there are people who are not equipped with a personal vehicle who arrive by paratransit and who live in town. So these are all important, but just please remember that a lot of your constituents do not benefit from the use of a personal vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just a quick question for the
Go ahead,
group.
Katrina.
And Jen, thank you for bringing it up. I would assume there's some interest in having like a bike rack near the building. I don't know. That's not something that we did talk about in programming, and Chief, this is kind of up to you. I know in terms of people who are training there, they're usually coming in vehicles. But it could be anybody who lives in town who's a landlord and just walks there and doesn't have a vehicle, as Jen is saying. Is there interest in having a bike rack anywhere on site?
They're caucusing.
Yeah, well, if you don't, people attach their bike to something you don't want them to attach it to. So
Exactly.
Can we have one that actually allows people to secure their bike? That would be
helpful. I can tell you that the planning board is going, I mean, they don't have a say in this, but I'm sure you will present them with the design, or I hope you will. But yes, you're going to get that comment from a lot of different people, and you're especially going to get it from members of the planning board.
Okay.
That I know.
Any other questions or comments for the design team?
Yeah, I got one.
Go ahead.
Because City of Greenfield is all electric, at least in terms of its buildings. I assume at some point it's going to want to go electric in terms of its fleet and its residents. Do we need to plan, maybe not this moment and as budget allows, but somehow plan for some charging stations for both, you know, for the staff anyway? Maybe not the public, they should be charging at their own homes, but you know, maybe a couple of charging stations for the firefighters, you know, and their staff parking. That's something we should look at.
Yes, Mayor.
I can address that. It's unfortunate that Carol isn't here, but she is at a conference, so that's why she's not here. We are moving all of our fleets to at least hybrid. I mean, there's some the police department can't be all electric, all electric. So we are moving them to hybrids. It's required by the green communities, for us to do that. And as far as charging stations go, they are expensive, so to say, as cost allows, but we regularly apply for grants to get charging stations. So there may even be a grant application out there, or that's pending, that I could certainly talk to Carol about reserving 1 or 2 of the charging stations for the new police department. And actually, I don't know, Jean, do you recall that ever coming up for the fire station, for the library? I don't recall that coming up, but I would think they would want them there too.
So I think we should plan for infrastructure, if nothing else,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Get,
Yes,
get conduits out there, have them terminated inside the electric room, and
exactly. Yep.
we can plop a charger on there when they become available. Pretty soon, they're gonna be growing on trees like leaves.
Sure.
Just so everybody knows, we have one of our experts from Melville, Patrick Stone, has joined. He's been listening in. And Patrick is one of our experts in resiliency and sustainability. And one of the things he is looking at is, what do electric apparatus look like? What's that going to do to the building, on the inside, not just charging stations? Electric apparatus, they're being delivered around the country. Rosenbauer now has, a standard one. Patrick's been doing a lot of research, and, just to let you know, I think that might be another thing, Neil, just in terms of infrastructure, that hey, maybe there should be some conduit. Maybe we'll talk to Patrick about, what do we do in the bays, and what is that electric apparatus going to look like in 10 or 20 years, and what should we do there so you're not tearing up a brand new building. So we'll have that discussion also.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, kind of moving on. Okay, so for the planning dates, I think we've done that. We're gonna do it on the 15th and move forward with what you folks are gonna offer us to look at, mull over, and discuss. So the next item would be budget updates and projections. Maybe Neil?
Yeah, Butch, can I just ask a question for the meeting on the 15th? Is it the committee's desire to have the information in advance of the meeting? Or do you want us to roll it out at the meeting? And I want to make the discussion tonight, I think, has been one of the best meetings we've had so far. A lot of input, a lot of dialogue, a lot of feedback. And I want to try to emphasize the importance of that going forward. So I don't know what's coming. I'm not sure whether it's beneficial to present it ahead of time or to walk through it at the meeting, but I'd like to just explore that with Pacheco Ross now, please.
Certainly, I'd like to have information before a meeting. It just helps me get my head around some of it. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I agree. It'd be nice to have the designs a day or so beforehand, so we could ask questions at that meeting, and we don't have to have another meeting to ask the questions. So it gives us a little time to digest, and then we could ask questions and maybe solve things and be that much, more steps ahead of the game. It's always nice to have information before the meeting.
Okay, I think that's exactly how we'll treat it. So, that Friday before the meeting, we should be feeding you some information. So at least you have the weekend and that Monday to mull it over.
Okay. Good. All right. Yes, go ahead, Kate.
I have a concern to bring up about the mechanical systems. I know that was something that we talked about early on in the process. we're at the point where we need to bring back to the committee the discussion, and that's something that should take a good chunk of a discussion. So whether that also happens on the 15th or on the 18th, I know that was another kind of penciled in date. We want to make sure that we've got our MEP engineers speaking to you about what were the remaining options, because at this point, we do need to have that decision from the city as to which direction to go. And since I'm not that engineer to talk about all of the systems, I know that the basic difference, one was all electric and one was with a small propane backup for a boiler, or if it's Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong. I know I'm probably
It
using
was
the
for
wrong
the
term.
generator.
Yeah,
So
So-
replacing generator capacity with the boiler.
with a boiler. Yep. So I don't know if the committee has already discussed this in a separate discussion, but we need to have that direction sooner than later. And that's going to help us keep on track for where we're going with the building.
Will the 18th work for you on that?
I'll have to check with them. I know that I had asked them about the 8th actually, and they said they were available on the 8th, but I don't want to have 15 different meetings. So
Right.
I can ask and get back to you. I can try emailing them right now as we sit here.
Sure. My only concern is that I think we'll have a lot to chew on the 15th. And
Mayor, were you
Yes,
going
ma'am.
to say something?
Relative to what Katrina just discussed, I don't know if you've had George Vandalinder into your meetings or not. Can someone tell me whether he's been there? Because he's on this committee. He chose, well, I think he is, he's intended to be, or he's intended to be called in pretty much at that time when you are discussing things like HVAC and electrical systems and mechanical rooms and so forth. And he was very valuable and had significant input on the library and was at some of those meetings. So I can certainly loop him in for another meeting where you are going to be discussing those things. And just tell him to ask him to appear at that meeting, whatever, or maybe it's a series of meetings. But
Well,
if he's been there all along, then I don't need to do that.
thank you, Mayor. I think we haven't had separate discussions from the committee about the mechanical systems. So the intent was to bring him back into the committee group to hear everyone's concerns and have you, have him answer your questions so that you could come to a decision. If that's something that does make sense for the 8th, let me just double check, which is next Monday. He did say he was available for a 4 o'clock meeting, and that way we could have perhaps a very concise, pointed discussion with this group about that and come to a conclusion.
sure, the 8th works for me. If it works for everybody else, let's
It
do the
doesn't,
8th.
it doesn't work well for me at the front end, but that's okay. I don't need to be part of that discussion, but I think I would like to loop George in if he's available.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
he was at the last meeting where we did discuss that, but that was quite some time ago. And he did have some concerns about one system over another on the maintenance side. Go ahead, Marlo.
Yeah, that should be a problem with George. Him and I have been kind of splitting duties. He's going to the library. I'm coming to this meeting, but he said absolutely when he's needed to let him know to chime in on what he needs to on this project.
Okay, so why don't we plan for the 8th for that one specific subject?
Which I will not be able to attend that meeting. I'll be out of town.
Okay,
Will Roger be available?
Should be.
Roger? Yeah, okay, great.
okay. Very good.
thank you.
Budget, Neil.
Yes, you should have received an email from me around 2:30 this afternoon that had the budget updated. we took and updated the budget we had sent you previously for invoices paid. I think the last letter that we had processed was the 26th of October, and we haven't done anything since. So we dated the budget update the 31st. Do people prefer I share my screen? Would that
Yes,
help?
please. Yes.
Yes.
Hold on one second. Let me just bring it up. You guys see that?
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. So numbers updated to date represent payments that have been made to the various parties. We have made very little, if any, changes in original budget amounts. So we're still targeting the same budgets that you had previously seen. 10.1 for construction, $1.4 million for the architect, $535 for the OPM. 220,000 in miscellaneous project expenses, 615,000 in furniture and equipment. Probably the biggest change that we've seen to date. We have completed the site acquisition. So these costs represent the amount of the deposit plus the amount that was put into escrow for the closure on Main and Coombs. And the $899 number reflects the number that we have paid to date for the temporary station. I've taken a look at the costs incurred to date, plus the remaining lease payments that we have on the structures over the 22 months. And that number is still trending just below the $2 million. So I'm holding that as a placeholder right now based on best information and what we've spent to date. And we still are maintaining 900,000 plus in outstanding contingency, or uncommitted contingency, I should say. So totals to date, 2.2 million and change. 14.7 left to go, gets us to the $17 million budget that we're tracking. Happy to take any questions.
I have a question. On the contingency side, I'm kind of going back to our visitation over the years of different facilities. And we visited the East Hampton Public Safety Complex and talking with the fire chief down there during the construction portion of the fire station, their budget got cut. And so they were forced to cut the size of their apparatus bay and make a very weird jog in it. And it created a flow problem. Not only did it look weird, but it wasn't designed to operate that way, and it created a flow problem. Additionally, they cut $30,000 to properly seal their apparatus bay. They had a heated apparatus bay area, and it took only a very few years with apparatus coming in and out of there being wet or snow or salt or road chemicals to degrade the apparatus bay. And they had to go back to the city for an additional $150,000 to make the repair and seal it properly. My question is, do you think the 900,000 will be adequate to cover if we should find ourselves in the middle of the construction and we can't get materials, or the materials that we're seeking have such a premium on it that it's going to reduce our allotment for building the complex, and we'll have to make structural changes there by reducing the amount of money we have? So the question is, do you think we have enough in contingencies projected on what you're seeing in the industry, which I know is crazy right now, in getting products and the prices being quoted for the products and materials?
Great question, Butch. We try to bring escalation into every estimate that we prepare. Once we get to the point that we have an agreed upon schematic design and we will produce an estimate, that estimate will in fact contain a pricing escalation, which tries to take into account future price volatility. And time will tell. At $927,000, that works out to be just over 5.5% of the overall project budget, and it's almost 10% of the construction budget. So if everything else stays in line and we get, which I'm sure we will, and we'll get a good quality set of documents from Pacheco Ross with no change orders, right, Dennis?
No, now you gotta talk to Kate and Adam. I don't run that piece of it.
You know, if we go into a $10 million build with $500,000 in contingency, that's pretty typical. So I am safeguarding ourselves that we are. I think that there's a good probability that we may go over the 22-month lease period that we have on the temporary station. I think that we're going to run it. I believe, unless something drastically changes in the marketplace, that there are going to be materials that are impacted by supply chain issues that we're seeing across the board on everything from steel to steel deck to roofing materials to insulation board. We can't design around everything. So I am trying to be very mindful that there is a liability that we have committed to as part of this project. And if we do in fact go over the 22 months, we have to be able to fund that additional lease payment. So I'm trying to be as conservative as possible.
And that payment is $45,000 a month, just for that part. Are there any additional costs with your operation or the design team if we start running a few months beyond sort of our target date for finish?
Yeah, one of the things we can do, and again, we have to be very, very careful how we do it in Massachusetts. We can introduce a few alternates into the building. And again, I don't want to tick off the chief or anything, but one of the easier ones, for example, could be the epoxy system on the bay floor, going from that to, say, a sealed concrete. You know, that could easily be a $90,000 or $100,000 alternate. But we have to be extremely careful how we pick those alternates, because as you know, you have to use them in order the way you pick them. But that could also give us a little additional buffer if we feel we need it. So that was just an example. It's not exactly where we're going, but we can look at, 2 or 3 alternates to help buffer that if the supply chain is still a huge problem, which it probably will be.
Are there any other questions or comments on the budget? I can only see a few of you, so.
I can stop sharing, Butch.
I have a question, Butch,
Go
Mayor.
ahead.
I'm looking at your 13 Prospect Street build out number, and I thought we authorized 24,000. Did we end up deciding that it wasn't going to cost that much and we put in 20, or did I dream that other number?
I'll be honest, Mayor, I did it from memory. So if I remembered it incorrectly, I can make that adjustment.
I'd have to go back and look at that change order, but I think that, and I
It was
think it was
24
in
and
the
change.
change order, but I can't remember if Chief may know. I thought we wanted to be on the safe side and make sure there was enough at the time, and so we did 24, I think, but,
We authorized up to 24,000.
yeah, that's what I thought.
24 even?
Yeah. I believe so.
Oops. Excuse me.
The chief confirmed.
Yeah, Chief
24 in chat.
verified that in the chat.
Here we go.
Oh. Chief in
Any-
the chat.
Any other questions or comments? I can't see everybody, so.
Okay.
um,
So we either just added 4,000 from and took it from someplace else.
So Mayor, we had a little bit of surplus funds on the site acquisition line.
No.
If you recall, we had estimated that there would be some capital improvement required to Coombs Avenue. And so the surplus from the site acquisition was intended to be deferred to make any roadway improvements or whatever else. That
Mhm.
money realistically should probably flow to the construction budget because we'll likely do it all under the GC's contract, if you will. So we'll be moving some money around. I didn't want to move it too quickly, and I didn't want to make too many moves without explaining what we were doing and why. That's
Okay.
all.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing
I'm
none.
happy to take any questions or comments by email. I realize it's a lot of money and it's a lot of numbers to digest all at once. So.
Okay. Okay, the next item, I put in there projected schedule dates for moving forward. That was more for the architects to kind of tell us what dates we need to hit to give you authorization to really ramp up and go.
Right, and I'll answer on this verbally. I know everybody wants to see a nice written chart, and I'm working on having that not just for you, but also for our team. But the goal with an April 15th bid, working back from there, we need to be wrapping up our schematic design with your inputs by the end of November. So all of the meetings that we've been talking about next week on the 15th and so forth, those are the big inputs that we do need from the committee that will help us meet this deadline, so that we can get our design narratives off to the estimator, get the estimator, give us the feedback so that we know we're still on track for the budget that we know we have. So that's where we're going in the immediate future. The intent is that once we get the sign off and everyone agrees with the look and the appearance, and we're working forward on a site plan presentation and approval, or whatever we need to do with the city, then we can work forward on our design development drawings, which is much more of on the engineer and architect's plate. And there's less input from the committee at that point, but there will still be bits and pieces that we will want to come to the group for. So right now it is the intense portion of getting your input in November so that we can hit these dates.
Okay, good. Right. Any other questions for the design team on the scheduling at all? Looks like we're gonna have to hustle this month and get it done for you folks. I'd just like to make a general comment. I really want to thank a lot of people. The mayor, David Singer, certainly David Marscatello and his group. If you recall, when we started this project, it was a $10 million budget to build a fire station. It shifted almost immediately to a temporary setup. And, you know, in the design team, and Neil pivoted really quickly and worked on it. And, you know, the subcommittee did an awesome job of bringing on board the temporary. It occurred when we didn't actually even have a budget for it. We hadn't gotten the extra 6 million yet. And it happened during the time of COVID, and no bidders out there, struggling to get, you know, decent pricing, struggling to get product. You know, moving Marlowe and the DPW in spontaneously when they had already scheduled work for the year. And then they got hamstrung with all the water main breaks and still stayed with our program. Can't say enough about, you know, their commitment. The mayor, you know, David Singer and others that went before the committee and fought for our additional money to actually make it a project. You know, that was key. You know, the work that David and others did in closing the deal for the property, there was no shortage of Tums and Rolaids through that period. And it happened, and now we're at a point where we're actually doing the work that we should be doing, and that's building the new fire station. So I can't thank all you folks enough for all the work that you folks have put into this.
Thanks, Butch.
Greatly appreciate it because I've been working on it for 12 years. So thank you very much. If there's nothing else, David, I think we're ready for adjournment.
Okay, thanks. If you want to adjourn, say aye. Mayor.
Aye. That's a funny motion.
Hmm.
Butch.
Aye. Yes, it is a funny motion.
Bob.
Aye.
David Muscaratello.
Aye.
Carol here. Amy.
Aye.
Great. Steve.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Liz. Might be here. Jean.
Ah,
David. Aye. Thank you for a great meeting. See you all on the 15th.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see
Thanks,
each other
everyone.
on the 8th. Yeah,
Yep, thanks.
We all
the
see each other
MEP.
on the 8th at a committee meeting?
The MEP meeting, yes, on the 8th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.